Supplemental math videos from Circle Christian School.
Angle relationships. These are very special angles that you really need to know exactly what's happening with these angles all the way through geometry. So you need to make them your special angle friends. I got an angle, you got an angle, hey, hey, hey. Kind of comes from Little Rascals, but there was a pickle involved. Complementary angles are two adjacent angles. That's two angles that are right next to each other. Just like you and your adjacent neighbor, you end up sharing a fence between the two of you, but you're right next door to each other. Complementary angles equal 90 degrees, equal a right angle. So it's two angles that, when you add them together using the angle addition postulate, always equal 90 degrees. So for instance, if my first angle equaled 30 degrees, then my second angle would have to equal 60 degrees, because when we add them together, they equal 90 degrees. The next one is supplementary angles. Those are angles that equal a straight line, which that one's not really a straight line, but pretend it is. Magic of dry erase kind of stuff. That when they're adjacent to each other, they actually equal 180 degrees when you add them together using the angle addition postulate. So let's say the first angle equals 75 degrees, then the other angle is going to equal 180 degrees minus the 75 degrees, which, using your mental math, would be 105 degrees. Now, one of the ways that I remember that complementary equals 90 and supplementary equals 180 is just a method of realizing that C comes before the S, and 90 comes or is lower than before the 180. So the C, which is low, equals a lower value, while the S, which is further along in the alphabet number line, equals 180. You can find your own special way to relate to how you can remember that complementaries are 90 and supplementaries are 180. A linear pair is a pair of angles that are supplementary. So a linear pair always equals 180 degrees. And it's called a linear pair because when you put the two angles together, they make that cute little straight line. And again, depending on what the value is of the first one added to the second one, using the angle addition postulate, that they will just always equal 180 degrees. Vertical angles are when you have two intersecting lines. And again, when we talk angles, we're talking about the space in between them, not how long the line is, but how far it is from ray to ray. Vertical angles are always congruent, the guys opposite each other. And because they're congruent, you can set up a relationship between the two angles being congruent to each other. So we're going to call this angle 1, angle 2, angle 3, and angle 4. With vertical angles, that angle 1 would be congruent to angle 3, and angle 2 would be congruent to angle 4. Now what's interesting here is that actually we have angles that produce a linear pair, because a linear pair equals 180 degrees and also makes a straight line. So we have several linear pairs here. So if we were to add angle 1 with angle 4, it would equal 180 degrees because it's a linear pair. And then we can move to the next ones, which would be angle 4 and angle 3. We would add them together and they would make another linear pair at 180 degrees. Following again that same theory, we could take angle 3 and add it to angle 2, and it too is going to equal 180 degrees. And lastly, we can take angle 2 and add it to angle 1, and it too will equal 180 degrees because they're a linear pair. Now, the deal behind all this is learning what the 4 special angles do, because they're going to allow you to set your equations using the angle addition postulate to either equaling 90 degrees if they're complementary, Realize I know this sounds like it's an I, but it's an E, and our southern drawl just kind of makes it be like an I. We can have supplementary angles that when you add them together always equal 180 degrees, so they can be supplementary. We can have a linear pair that when you add them together always equal 180 degrees. And lastly, we can have, my cursor's getting kind of funky there. Maybe I can make it nice. Let's just get rid of the R and we'll make it right. And then we have vertical angles that are equal to each other. Vertical equals the opposite vertical. So they're congruent to each other. And this allows us to be able to set up the algebra. If we know what the special angle properties are, then we can set up the algebra, which I know you love, and do these all day long. Okay, go out and make little angel, angle, friend, funness. Here's a good example of two intersecting lines. Intersecting lines leave us with two different possibilities of an angle relationship. The first one is, do we have linear pairs? That is, two angles adjacent to each other that make a straight line. Okay, so I'm going to show you this straight line here. And a straight line, the angles always equal 180 degrees. The next thing is, do we have angles that are vertical, opposite each other? Vertical angles are always congruent. Because the shared x's, the 9x plus 20, and you have a 7x degrees, are a linear pair, and they have an x, they share an x, they don't have a y, so you want to do one variable at a time. The property for a linear pair is to add them together. All right, so we're going to set it up so that we take the first angle, 7x, and we're going to add it to the second angle, 9x plus 20. And linear pairs are supplementary, so the magical geometry number is 180 degrees. Now we've got our great algebra. We're just going to combine our like terms. And we're going to isolate our variables. So we're going to go minus 20 That leaves us with a 16x equals 160. Divide by the 16, or think 16 times what's 160, and it's 10. Once we have what a variable equals, now we can put it back into the equation and solve for the measurement of our angles. So our first angle here is going to equal 70 degrees. 90 plus 20 is 110. The double check is that these two adjacent angles equal 180 degrees. Now we can check on the vertical angle since we have a value here. The vertical angle is congruent to the opposite angle. And so now we can set up as 2y equals the 70. Divide by 2, divide by 2, and y is going to equal 35. I like to circle my answers for my variables because I know I'm going to have to put it back in. And so we know y equals 35. Our double check is to put a 35 back here. And because the two angles here are vertical and congruent, the double check says, hey, this is 70 degrees. And if we really want to get wild and woolly here, we can double check here. We have a linear pair, which equals 180 degrees. And we can double check across from here. And the value should be the same at 110. And it does. Check out the next good example. All right, here's another Nutter Butter peanut butter cookie bar that challenges us with the fact that they have X's and Y's. Anytime you have two lines that intersect each other, always think about, do I have a linear pair or do I have vertical angles? And of course we have both. Vertical angles are the ones that are opposite each other. And I like kind of just doing my little angle thing here. Vertical angles are opposite, which means your algebra is going to be congruent. Linear pairs, when added together, equal that magical geometry number of 180. Looking at all three equations, these linear pair, two angles here that make a nice straight line, equal 180. But we have a y and we have an x. And those kind of get in the way. However, if we take a look at the next linear pair, we see that they both have an x along this line. Vertical angles would not work. That is, angles that are across from each other. The 5y plus the 38 equals the 8x plus the 26. But again, we have a problem of having a y and an x. So let's go find the x first, because once we find x, we can go find y. Linear pair means that the two are going to be added together. So we have an 8x plus the 26 plus the 3x equals that magical geometry number of 180. We combine our like terms,
Get 11x plus the 26, and it equals 180. This is the algebra that you know and love. Take away the 26 and take away the 26. Opposite signs. 11x will equal the 154. If you need, take out your handy dandy little calculator. Divide by 11. But I'm pretty good with my 11 times tables. And I know 11 times 14 would equal the 154. Once you get something, always circle it. All right, there's two ways to do this actually. Once we find 14, we can plug it in at where the 3x is and do another linear pair. 3 times 14 is going to be 42. And we can let that equal 180 and go find y. Or we can put the 14 in the 8x plus the 26. Okay, so this would be the linear pair way. So I'll write linear pair. And this would be the vertical way. That we would have the 5y plus the 38 would equal the 8. Take the x away and put a 14 in there, plus the 26. So remember that a linear pair is an angle plus an angle, and vertical angles are an angle is congruent to an angle, and you can go solve using your algebra. There you go. Go out and angle up the world, okay? Have a good day.